the higher end solutions. But first, I want to kind of get started, and the webinar today is about WannaCry. And what's different about this? I'm sure everybody's heard about ransomware. It probably has been impacted in some way or another. But all of a sudden, this WannaCry is something different. It's unique. It's kind of got some buzz going on in the security community, and that's kind of what we want to explore today. So let's kind of start out with that and kind of understand what happened there and why it's different. So first, ransomware. You guys are all familiar with it, how it works, and most of you probably know already what the defenses are for ransomware, right? It's usually a multi-tier defense. If you guys haven't watched on our YouTube channel, we do have an excellent webinar called Anatomy of a Ransomware, and we have some guest speakers. That one was a joint webinar with Dado and Fishme. And Aaron Higby does a great job at explaining ransomware, the anatomy of it, and we go into a demo of showing how we actually infect machines with ransomware, and along the way we show the steps of the protections that could take place. So we'll show step 1 protection, disable that one, step 2 protection, disable that one, step 3 protection, and as we go along we show you how the defenses work, and at the end of it, you know, this is how it gets infected, and then Dado shows how the backup system, how the restoration works well. So really, combination of all those tools really helps to avoid ransomware as a whole, and not just ransomware, but it helps to prevent any kind of these threats as a whole. But the unique part about WannaCry is it wasn't just ransomware, and it wasn't really anything new. The new part, or the buzz, was because there was a combination of tools used. And the other tool that was used with WannaCry is a worm. So what is a worm, right? Everybody's heard of a computer worm or a worm virus, but what is it really, and is it all the same, or are there different kinds of worms? So that's kind of what I want to get into. And before I get into this specific one, just get into what a worm exactly does. So a worm basically, with no interaction from the user, it can go and spread to another computer. So typically with ransomware, what you see is emails get sent out, somebody clicks on a link, there's an attachment to the email, and it's all user interaction, and a lot of it has to do with tricking the user to doing something. So there's a large part of social engineering that takes place there. With a worm, it tries to spread itself, so you don't even have to have any interaction from the user. And there's actually different types, and I'll give some examples too. So for example, there is an email worm. An example is my doom, right? Oh, looks like these are automatic, but email worm, and an example is my doom. So basically what it does is when executed on the computer, it tries to go into your email contacts and email itself to all of your contacts. Your contacts get an email from you, and it might have some clever message in there, and it tricks them into executing the attachment or clicking on the link or whatever the case may be. So that's one type of worm. Been pretty effective, and a lot of it's like killing emails and spreading pretty quickly. Another one could be through a share. So it could infect a file that's commonly shared on some kind of file share. And these were more common earlier because there's a lot more file sharing and everything going on from a typical file share perspective, client server type. Here's an example of one that was a big one out there, probably around 15 or 20 years ago, so that's another type, right? But again, it relies on users are accessing something. It relies on user being authenticated already. So it's a little bit of different type of worm, but it does spread on its own. Oop. So another one is application. So IRC bot, that one specifically spread through IRC channels, and it also relies on an application being installed and some kind of user being authenticated to something. But then there's the vulnerability kind, and this is where WannaCry fits in, the worm part of it. So the vulnerability kind, like some examples, Sasser is probably one of the biggest ones up there. If you guys are have been in this for a while, you probably remember things like NIMDA and SQL Slammer and Code Red. So why these are interesting is because it almost requires zero interaction from the user. It's all based on just the code running itself, and it spreads. Uh, and that's what makes it so scary and so unique. If you guys remember SQL Slammer, I think like the infection spread, worldwide in like 10 minutes. That's how bad it was. I remember NIMDA. I spent, um, man, I spent like 2 or 3 days in the enterprise trying to get that thing cleaned up, and it seemed like as soon as you clean it up, it starts spreading again. So that was a tough one and then you have to wait for patches and all that kind of stuff. And then somebody new comes on the network that isn't patched, and bam, there they are again, and they bring it into the network again. So these type of things were very, very scary. They were very, very hard to deal with. But basically, what happens is if a computer is running with the worm, it'll automatically it'll automatically scan the network. It'll find another host, and it'll actually go and execute that virus on another host with zero interaction from the other user. And then once this one is infected, it'll go and scan again and start infecting other ones. So it automatically propagates without anybody even knowing. So the question is, well, how did it get into the network, right? Like we all have firewalls nowadays, and if it's out there somewhere, like how does it pass through the firewall to get into the network? Well, so WannaCry, it's a lot of people believe that it was a worm only, but actually there was quite a few traditional emails sent out with attachments and URLs. We actually blocked quite a bit of the virus downloads, and we blocked some in attachment and emails as well that were coming across. So that was one level of protection that we provided there. But say for example, and this thing's going automatic here. Say for example, this computer over here gets an email or gets a link, and they click on it, and it's just one computer in the network. And it could be somebody with the least amount of privileges. It could be even a guest. Who knows who it could be, right? But it could just somebody that's on the network there. And all of a sudden, they click and execute the WannaCry, the virus. And what happens is, as soon as it infects this machine, it automatically scans the network, spreads, and then infects everybody else. And then these guys over here, these could be admins and have access to everything, right? Maybe it's a host that's connected to multiple networks, and it gets infected, then it starts spreading across multiple networks or has access to other networks. So that's the scary part about it, that it can spread a lot quicker, and that's kind of how it got inside networks. The other thing is like, well, nobody clicks on anything, my users know better. Yeah, I mean, you like to think your users know better, but in reality, it's a lot of times these emails are crafted so well. But the other thing is this: imagine if your network is just VPN connected to another network, right? And somebody on on a partner company that's got VPN access across to do file sharing, they're the ones that click on a file, right, and execute it. Well, it's going to infect everything locally, but then it could quickly spread across that VPN and infect everything on the other side. And imagine this. Imagine if you have a remote user sitting somewhere at Starbucks or somewhere at a hotel or somewhere at another network, and they're VPN'd in, right, accessing files. And all of a sudden someone on that local network hits them, infects them, and then that virus comes across, that worm comes across the VPN and infects everything on your network, and then goes across other VPNs and infects those. And that's the one thing I want to really point out here is from a security perspective, how just because you have a private network, having inspection in there is very important. Having things like IPS and those type of things is very important. Being able to inspect that traffic within the tunnel. So this thing's clicking on its own. So you can see here the infection map. Within 44 minutes, this thing spread really quickly across the world, right? And that's the power of this type of vulnerability worm, where it uses a vulnerability and it's got an exploit built in to take advantage of that vulnerability, because it can go and spread and execute itself without anybody knowing about it. is very different than having to have user interaction, because there's definitely a delay in that, and there's the possibility that the user is going to do the right thing. So that's kind of the power, the combination of those two things. So they use multiple campaigns. One is email, and then as soon as all it takes is one person in that network to be the bad guy, or to be the one that made the mistake, and everybody on the network suffers from that the consequence. And not just on that network, but any network they're connected to, they suffer as well. All right, so how do you defend against this type of stuff, right? So as I mentioned, there's multiple tiers here, and there's multiple protections. So ransomware itself, I mean, that's a virus, right? So you need antivirus. Typically, gateway antivirus, that's what My Digital Shield does. Host-based antivirus, it could protect against it. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. It depends on how clever the virus is, right? And how it can interact with that, if it can maybe enable it. Obviously, the more protection, the better. But anyways, the actual ransomware itself, antivirus is the protection from it. You might have a phishing URL, right, from regular ransomware, where and also with WannaCry, you had some attachments, you had some links to click on, and with that you had web filtering. So if the user does get a phishing link, a phishing URL, and says, hey, click on this, they click on it, and that web filter is going to block it, say, hey, this is a malicious website, this is a phishing website, you're trying to go and do something there. Third one is command and control or botnet, right? And so this is if the virus has command and control, typically IPS or application control type functions would be the ones that would block those that botnet activity or that command and control activity. Now, WannaCry, it didn't have a C2, right? You probably heard about this kill switch thing. So that was not really a C2. It was just a kind of like a preventive, whatever it was, right? As soon as a domain was available, it automatically just died. It was really a kill switch. That's what they called it, and that's really what it was, accidentally triggered. But typically, you have a C2 or command and control server with ransomware, and the reason for this, there's a couple of reasons, but the main reason is this. So WannaCry, it did not have a C2, so it had to use a common encryption key across everything that it infected. And because it used a common encryption key, in a matter of less than a week, somebody came up with a decryptor, right? And somebody came up with a decryptor because everything's encrypted the same way using a common key. And then now all of a sudden everybody can decrypt their files. Because of this, the ransom total amount that was paid to the hackers was only $70,000. Doesn't seem like a lot, right? It wreaked so much havoc. It probably cost $1 billion and all of these damages and everything, and the hackers got away with a mere $70,000. And that's really because of the lack of using a C2 on their behalf. If they used the C2 command and control and used a unique key, there wouldn't be a decryptor, and it would be a lot harder to to resurrect that information, and probably they make out with a heck of a lot more money. Not sure why they made that decision to do that, but that's what happened there. And the last part of it is the worm part, right? And this was the unique part here in WannaCry, is the worm part where it could spread automatically and infect computers automatically and easily. And again, the functions of that is the intrusion prevention and application control. Both functions there work together in order to catch any kind of worm propagation, any worm spreading there. There could be sometimes there's other functions as well that would catch these type of things, but these are primarily the areas of focus. Sometimes you'll find when somebody does one thing, they tend to use that more for everything else. They don't necessarily do it the best. Like say, for example, if somebody is doing just web filtering, right? They'll try to do web filtering to block C2 and botnet, to block worm propagation, to block other things. They could do a little bit of it, but typically that's a function of another type of tool. So the other thing to point out here is with WannaCry, there was no real web filtering function there, right? Besides those emails that were sent out, most of them were attachments anyways, right? So there was no real link to click in. With all of these, if you think about defenses like DNS sinkholing, something like an open DNS, it didn't really play a role there because most of the protection or most of the attacks were the actual ransomware itself and the worm, and those two, and the email, right? So all of that had nothing to do with any kind of DNS filtering whatsoever. And this is kind of a reason, not trying to say that something like DNS sinkholing is a bad thing. It has its role, but this is a reason why you need the full stack of protection. You know, cybersecurity isn't one thing; it's a combination of things. Exactly like physical security, right? It's like you can't, like, we live peacefully in this country, knowing that we're safe, right? We send our kids to school, we go to the malls, we do all these type of stuff, right? And you say, well, why do we do all this stuff and we feel great about it? Because we feel secure. Well, why is that? Well, because we have a good police force in our town. Okay, well, because we have the police force, does that mean we need to stop locking our doors? Or we don't need to lock on our doors anymore? No. Do we need like a military? Well, no, that's not the case. Of course, we need a military. Do we need an alarm system in our house? Well, probably, but I don't know, maybe not. Do we need to keep money in our banks? Well, probably, yeah, right. We're not going to keep it at our house or on us all the time because we could get mugged. The point I'm trying to make is, like physical security, to be safe, cybersecurity isn't one thing. It's a combination of things, and sometimes we don't even realize they're there. We're just so used to it. And that's really with cybersecurity. A lot of times people don't realize what's happening in the background, but it does need to happen in the background in order for everybody to be safe and things to function normally. And that's, I don't know if that's a good explanation, but it's one that I've used before for non-technical people, and it seemed to fit very well, right? It's like, look, there's a lot of stuff that needs to happen in the background to ensure your business is running smoothly, and there's a whole stack of things that need to happen, and we need those things to work together as a whole, right? It's not that you can get rid of one because you have the other. No, you have to have the combination of the stuff. So what does MDS do? And especially what does MDS do that's different, right? Well, the key thing to having all of these functions here, and there's more functions as well, is how good are they? And how good are they really depends on your threat intelligence. Any virus. Well, how many viruses can you detect, and how often are your signatures updated? Web filtering. Well, how many categories? How many actually websites are do you have? How many updates are there? Same with botnet and C2. That's a function that needs to be updated like all the time and very, very frequently. So how good is your filtering, right? And usually in our world, the filtering isn't that great. And the reason why is because something I call the cybersecurity trichotomy. Because you have this problem of security versus performance versus cost, right? And usually cost is the most important thing. Nobody wants to spend more money. And performance is the second most important thing because it impacts me today. It impacts me right now. I feel it. Security, you don't feel it right now. You only feel it when it's really, really bad, and then you feel it really bad. It's kind of that thing of you have to keep tuning your car and maintaining it and everything, and it's like it's something that you don't feel until it absolutely breaks. Or same thing with your body. You don't feel it until it absolutely breaks. So with this, you kind of have a few options here, and when you lean more towards cost and performance, you always take away from security. And because you do that, a lot of threats just get through because you don't have that threat intelligence, you don't have that inspection going on. If you lean more towards security and cost, you're always going to suffer in performance. As soon as you start turning everything, and a lot of times the security vendors out there on the SMB side, on the lower end UTMs, they even turn off a lot of the stuff. They don't even allow you to turn on everything. It's like typically you get maybe 1/3 of the threat intelligence, and that's a maybe. A lot of times it's even less than that. And then of course having everything turned on, it's gonna kill you on cost. It's gonna be extremely expensive to have the performance and have that security. So this is where my digital shield is very different. We took a different approach. Instead of doing the inspection on a box, what I call UTM in a box, we realized that a UTM function actually is taking more and more processing resources, and it's not going to get any better. It's going to get only worse and worse. We keep adding more engines, and each engine keeps adding more and more signatures in there, which all it's going to do is going to keep killing that box, and your bandwidth demands go up, right? So it's going to keep getting worse and worse all the time. So what we did, instead of trying to do all of that inspection on a box, we moved that inspection up into the network. So a couple of things happen here right away. One is unlimited processing resources. So it doesn't matter. We could turn on all of the security, and we could have it inspect for everything, and it's not going to impact performance because all of the processing is being shared across thousands of customers. So when you're using the bandwidth, you're borrowing the processing from somebody else. When they're using it, they're borrowing the processing from you. But the end result is you're constantly you have inspection for the full-blown security stack, all the threat intelligence, everything, and not suffering that performance like you would like having the UTM in a box. The other part of it is now that we're blocking all the stuff way up here, you're getting this kind of clean pipe or clean internet effect. And what that means is you see the stats up here, right? 48% of all traffic on the internet is bots. So if you're doing this UTM in a box and you're blocking these bots after they come across your network, well, your bandwidth is being eaten up by these things, right? And because you're blocking it only down here. Same thing with advertising. 68% of all web traffic, so when you're going somewhere, users going somewhere, we're blocking all those ads way up here before they pollute the bandwidth down here. So all of this bandwidth we leave it for you to use, for your users to use, and it's a lot cleaner bandwidth overall. So that's the power of OmniShield and being able to protect that up in the network. And so going over what we do actually in our cloud. So 19,000 IPS signatures or IPS rules to be able to protect things like those worms and those type of things. 2 million new updates per week of antivirus definitions. This is how many updates per week that we apply to our system. So you think about the scale of that, right? And how many there are out there, how many definitions there are active. Billions of definitions out there. Close to 6,000 application control rule sets. Again, these are things like to identify applications, and some of it is from the security perspective to identify things like bots and C2. 1.3 million new URL ratings per week. So this is on a weekly basis, right? There's over 350 million websites in the database today, and that's websites. So when you talk about how many individual pages, there's billions of individual pages, but 1.3 million new ratings per week. And as I mentioned, 350 million websites rated, and they're rated into 78 different categories so that we can properly apply them accordingly. So because of this, scale of protection, the way that we do this, we also partnered with Assurant, and we're providing up to a $50,000 cyber breach guarantee. So what does this mean? Just wanted to be very clear on what this means here. So a cyber breach guarantee, oftentimes the majority of it, what it would cover is if you had to, let's say, if you had your customer got ransomware, they got a cyber breach, and you went in there and you had to do cleanup. That would cover all of your time to do that cleanup. So this actually benefits you in a lot of ways. It also makes the customer feel happy that they're being properly protected. It also does things like any kind of PR. If they have customers and the records were stolen, it'll do all of the restoration services, credit monitoring, anything like that is involved in a cyber breach. This is what this all covers right here. It doesn't cover certain things like all insurance coverages. For example, like any kind of extortion, and paying ransom is a type of extortion. So if you actually pay the ransom, it would cover everything else, like your time and everything, but would not actually cover that the amount being paid for the ransom if you went ahead and paid through it with it. So that's why you need proper backups all the time. and it would cover your time to go in and do all the restoration and everything for that. So overall, this is kind of our new standard type of image of the differences, right? Doing the traditional UTM in the box, and also the way that we do it. Omniwin is our new product over here, but it's just taking the bandwidth and organizing it properly, structuring it properly, making sure not only do you have clean internet, but that internet is reliable, the traffic is properly organized, proper priorities, all those type of things. So I want to open it up to questions. I know I kind of went through this stuff pretty quickly, and hopefully it was informative and kind of brought a little bit more understanding of WannaCry, of how different it was than regular ransomware, and how it was able to spread really quickly across the globe in a matter of a day. So any questions?
Andrew, I'll ask the first one. This is Leonard. If I'm an MSP, an MSSP, a reseller, a break fix, someone who provides IT services for end customers, and they already think they provide cybersecurity. Let's call it, they have a firewall that they sell. What advice would you give to them in helping the end user understand their urgency or the importance of having a layered approach?
Yeah, excellent question. So I look at this as when you go in there, there's two things that you can say or do, and it really depends on, you can ask a question, right? And sometimes you might know the answer to this question. It's, look, have you ever been breached? And no, we haven't been breached. That's excellent, and that should show you the importance of cybersecurity, right? We've been protecting you. We've been updating those protections. We've been making sure that you have adequate protections all the time. And right now, security's gone haywire, right? 5 years ago, if I told you cybersecurity, you would have no clue what I'm talking about. And today, it's on the tip of everybody's tongue. It's in every movie. It's in everybody's living room, right? So this is why we need to yet again step it up so we can continue that proper protection so that you don't experience the breaches, so you can continue doing your business and focus on that instead of worrying about this new thing that's killing businesses every single day. If they say, yes, I have been breached, well, good. Then you realize the importance of cybersecurity, right? You've been breached, you know how that feels, you know how that can completely waste a day, kill business, the long-term effects of it. And luckily, that breach was something that was very, very small in comparison. It could have been a horrible breach, which some companies suffer, right? And this goes to show us that we haven't been properly keeping it up to spec, that we've been cheaping out, that we've been trying to save money, we've been, penny wise and pound foolish when it comes to cybersecurity. This goes to show us that we need to yet step it up again and make sure that we have the proper protection. There is no ultimate 100% secure. That doesn't happen anywhere. The word security and 100%, they do not go together. Those are oxymorons. When you talk about physical security, when you talk about cyber, when you talk about any kind of security, security is risk reduction, right? And the key thing is where do we put that lever, right? There is zero, which means absolutely zero security, and sometimes that's okay, right? Sometimes zero security is okay, because what that means is the cost of any security, it is more expensive than what the breach would cost and how many times that breach would cost, right? And sometimes it's perfectly fine, right? But in most cases, you need to have some level of security. And obviously you don't need too much. You're not going to go out and say, okay, well, we need to spend $5 million a year on protecting your business. Well, hold on a second. Our business only produces $1 million a year. Obviously, that doesn't make any sense, right? To have that level of protection. That's why you need to understand where to get the best bang for your buck, properly to protect the business, to make sure that they have proper business continuity. And I think those are kind of like the key ways to go in and talk to your customer. Just basically ensure them, look, we've been continuously protecting you, right? And this is why you're still in business. And we need to continue to protect you, but we need to step up our game. You know the word cybersecurity now.
All right, Andrew, we have another question. You briefly mentioned it, and because you mentioned it, you kind of let the cat out of the bag. What's the difference between Omniwin and OmniShield?
All right, excellent question. Yeah, I kind of let that cat out of the bag. So um, let me explain it really quick. I could possibly pull up a slide or two on a different slide deck here. Give me 1 second.
And we have a couple questions about OmniWin, Roger and John. So we'll be getting to the OmniWin. What is OmniWin? The differences with OmniWin, OmniShield, the coexistence of the products. So we'll get to those questions now, and then there's one or two others after that, Andrew.
Okay. So OmniWin, let me just kind of like bring this up and try to explain. So OmniShield, as you know it, right? It's the security portion. It's what we call elastic UTM, elastic unified threat management, which means it's unified threat management, has all the inspection, and it can dynamically expand and contract to make sure it suits your needs, right? It's not confined to a box. It's not limited to the performance of a box. It can do as much inspection as you want it to, and at whatever scale you want it to. The other thing it does is, because it's doing all, as I mentioned, it's doing all the protection, all the prevention up here, it gives you this clean pipe, and we always promote a clean internet. The one thing that we realized as soon as we got into this world of SMB is, before most of the technical staff here, we did a lot of this type of stuff in the telco world. I worked a lot with AT&T and Verizon, IBM, and everywhere where we did this type of elastic UTM, or they call it network-based UTM or network-based firewall, we always did it on what's called an MPLS line. Now, an MPLS line, it's a very expensive line, right? So you usually pay around 20 times more per bandwidth. Internet connectivity is always priced per bandwidth because that's the one metric that is kind of everybody understands. But it's, why does MPLS cost 20 times more for the same amount of bandwidth? Right? It's just ridiculous if bandwidth is the only metric. But the answer is bandwidth is not the only metric, and we realized it we extremely realized it when we got into the world of broadband, where now we're dealing with DSL and cable and everything else out there, as opposed to dealing in the world of good quality business lines. And a lot of those metrics are, jitter, latency, packet loss, just consistency, QoS, and all those type of things. So this is where OmniWin comes in. And as we're doing this, and we realize that, oh my God, what do we get ourselves into? Right? These internet connections are completely horrible. No wonder they're so cheap. They're just completely awful. Out of the heaven falls this new technology called software-defined WAN. And what software-defined WAN is it's an MPLS replacement, and it brings all of those quality metrics to broadband. And what OmniWin is exactly that. So what it does is it takes your DSL, your cable, and it has the ability to bond them together, but it also does a lot of interesting things per each connection, and also as a whole, in order to give it much better quality, and in some cases even much better than MPLS, but at a fraction of the cost, right? So it does things like organize, optimize, prioritize traffic. And to give like a straight up example, kind of like a visual example of how it actually works, so imagine like your internet connection, right? Your network is really, it's a delivery mechanism, right? It's something like a street, and the packets that go across it are really vehicles, and they have a payload, and that payload is just trying to deliver something. So imagine this is your internet connection, and your packets are trying to get from one side of it to the other side of it, right? And over here, you have plenty of bandwidth over here, right? Lots of width over here, no problem. And by expanding it, does it make it any better? Probably not, because it's not necessarily that your bandwidth congesting over here. It's just a matter of how this all is. But you have over here, you have all of these packets, all this traffic, all the vehicles trying to get from one end to the other. So what OmniWin does is this: it takes and it removes that and paves a whole new layer on top of it, right? So what it does is, number one, it puts guardrails up, so the cars aren't running off, your packets aren't running off somewhere and getting damaged or adding latency and that type of stuff, just killing the entire stream. So there's these virtual type of guardrails that are dynamic and grow and shrink. The other thing it does is it organizes the traffic, right? So there's different types of traffic. There's traffic that carry a lot more payload, and they're not latency sensitive. They're maybe more download bandwidth sensitive, right? Only things like streaming media. There's things that are like voice. They're high latency sensitive, high jitter sensitive, but they're not bandwidth sensitive, right? And then there's a few other classes as well. So the key thing is being able to identify those types of traffic and be able to organize it properly and put them all in the proper queues. And the end result, the effect, is actually incredible. And overall, the bandwidth could be even less, right? But the fact that they're properly organized and you have the guardrails and you have the path paid properly makes all the difference in the world of how everything's being delivered. So this is like a kind of a visual explanation of it. And one of the big problems is, I just kind of want to show this really quick. One of the big problems out there is that bandwidth is always the answer, right? And I'll just kind of, I've heard this before. I've had this with me as well. So this is 318 meg. This is me at home. And my wife's complaining that the internet's slow. My daughter's complaining that the internet's slow. And I look at it and it's 318 meg. And I call my ISP and they go, well, we can sell you 500 meg. And I'm like, what? I'm not sure that makes even sense, let me go to trusty old math and figure this stuff out, right? So when I go and I look it up and I go, okay, well, how am I using all of this bandwidth, right? What's going on here? And how is 500 megs going to make it better and different? Well, I go and start calculating and say, okay, imagine if I have like an HD Netflix stream going on. And just for the heck of it, let's say I have two of them, right? Maybe my daughter and my wife are watching something at the same time. And let's say for some reason we have guests over and we're doing like 5 YouTube streams at the same time on top of the Netflix streams. And then maybe I'm doing 5 WebEx sessions, right? Because I'm really busy and actually do them all at the same time, which is not realistic, but let's just throw that out there. And maybe we have like 10 people streaming audio using Spotify or Pandora. And on top of that, let's throw in 30 phone calls over VoIP. And let's throw in another 30 web sessions. So you think, okay, well, damn, you're using a lot of bandwidth over here. You got a lot of stuff going on. Everything from like HD quality video to tons of browsing sessions, tons of VoIP, streaming audio, everything else. So when I count it all up, how much of the bandwidth am I using? Am I getting close to that 300 meg? Well, the answer is I'm actually only using 35 meg of bandwidth. So where's the problem there? And the problem really is, it's not how much bandwidth you have, it's how well that bandwidth is organized, the quality of that bandwidth. What's really going on when those packets could go across there, and that's really the power of OmniWin. When you talk about SD-WAN out there, SD-WAN's become such a buzzword. You could ask 10 different people what SD-WAN is, and you might get 10 different answers. We've been working on this quite a bit. We've actually licensed some technology as well to make sure that we have some of the best algorithms in order to be able to provide the absolute best OmniWan or the best SD-WAN possible with OmniWan. We've heard great feedback, great results. We've heard things like people going from 200 meg connection and all of a sudden they're down to like 50 meg, and it works a heck of a lot better. Because now everything is like, before things weren't working well, you'd have things like, even things like on the 200 meg connections, I've heard somebody say, I'd turn on Netflix in a 30-minute show, it would rebuffer at least 3 times. He said, I installed OmniWan, and all of a sudden now I can do 3 Netflix streams at the same time, and I get not a single rebuffer at all, right? And at the same time, my son's playing games, and he's telling me how much faster it all is, how much faster the screens are painting and everything. And it goes to show you that it's not the bandwidth, right? Because there's no way you're using up 200 meg bandwidth. It's how well it's organized and how how the priorities work, how it functions across the network there, and how it can detect all the variables on that happen, because there's a lot of these variables on broadband. How well it can detect those variables and dynamically adjust for those variables. And that's really the power of OmniWin. And then when you have multiple links together, right? So if you, let's see if I have this picture here. Uh, don't have it there. Maybe this one will have it. Yeah, when you have multiple connections together, it will take and it'll look at each connection independently, and then it'll look at them as a whole as well. So what that means is this: is if you have traffic coming across, and let's say this line is a 200 meg line, but it's got about 100 milliseconds of latency. Meanwhile, this one over here is only a 10 meg line, but it's got 15 milliseconds of latency. Well, guess what? As you're coming across, it's going to take all VoIP traffic and try to send it down this line because it knows it's got less latency and it's less susceptible to jitter. Meanwhile, over here, it's going to put all of your bulk type data that is not latency sensitive, but more bandwidth sensitive, and it's going to use that over here, right? And depending on what this is, it could load balance across these by packet basis. In some cases, it'll actually, if it starts detecting that, hey, this is the better line for voice, but I'm detecting some outside variables, it'll actually send the voice packet, start sending the voice packet down 2 paths at the same time, just to make sure that the voice packet gets there. When it gets to the other side, it'll use the first one that gets there and discards the duplicate. And same thing on the way back. And when it goes, oh, okay, this one's kind of like that problem or that variable in the bandwidth went away, this has become stable again, it'll go back to normal operation. So it'll dynamically adjust those things, prevent downtime, prevent all this interruptions and latency. So sorry, I kind of went off on a rampage on Omniwin. I'll shut up now.
Andrew, there's definitely more questions regarding OmniWin. Additional questions are, what's the hardware requirement? Is it the same as OmniShield? And then, is there anyone else in the marketplace, and I'm throwing a couple at you at one time. First, address, if you would, the device hardware requirements. Is it the same or different than OmniShield? And then secondarily, and we only have a few minutes left, is there anyone else in the marketplace, mid-market or higher, that is doing a SD-WAN with security coupled together?
Those are excellent questions. So first, the OmniWin does require unique hardware because there is a lot of intelligence on this hardware in order to do the SD-WAN portion of it. So we're starting out with two types of what we call OmniBridge, right? So OmniWin is the service that's all the intelligence that connects both your local network to the cloud, to our cloud, and all the intelligence in there. OmniBridge is just a piece of hardware, right? So the bridge here is there's a 30 and a 50, and pretty simple. 30 has 3 Ethernet ports, and the 50 has 5 Ethernet ports. And these are interchangeable, right? So over here, you can have 1 WAN and 4 LAN, or you can have 4 WAN and 1 LAN, or anything in between that, right? The only thing is you have to have 1 WAN and you have to have at least 1 LAN. Same thing with here. And you can have active, you can have active standby, whenever it comes to OmniWin. But so this is the hardware that we're starting out with here. We will be coming out with more in the future, but we kind of picked these as a good starting point. Your kind of low cost, very lightweight, simple network. A lot of times it's going to be only 1 WAN and 1 LAN, or maybe 1 WAN and 2 LAN, or maybe in an active and standby, right? There's a lot of places like retail that would have an LTE standby or something like that, have 1 active LTE standby, and then just an internal network. And then you have the higher end one that will have more options there. And the second question, there are definitely other providers out there that are doing SD-WAN, such as VeloCloud and Big Leaf, and there's a bunch of them out there. They're extremely expensive. They're not channel friendly. They don't leave you a lot of margin at all. They're more focused on replacing MPLS, and they're more focused on the larger deals. Um, the there's actually nobody else that has this built in with security together. Uh, the there's some that are kind of partnering up, like VeloCloud. They've gone and they've partnered up with some of the security vendors, and really what that is hey, buy the two products together, and it's kind of like a more of a marketing effort to say, hey, you could combine these two products together. And what it is they'll have like Palo Alto and together with VeloCloud or something like that they'll kind of piece it together and say, hey, if you use these in combination, then you get security and you get your SD-WAN. As far as I know, MDS is the only one that has that combined thing where you order it all together. Here you go, here's your one device, and that thing gives you both SD-WAN and Elastic UTM all at the same time, all in one big bunch, all easy to manage, simple to set up. And it's extremely affordable. The quality of it is so great. The affordability is amazing, and you guys get tons of margin on it. I really don't believe there's anything else like it out there.
Andrew, another question. Are we saying Omniwin may or may not be advantageous to a single internet connection?
Omniwin is absolutely advantageous to a single internet connection. I have personally experienced it at home. I've experienced it, how what it does, as far as quality goes. I've heard a lot of feedback from other people, the experience that they got from what it's doing just from a single internet connection. So a single internet connection, absolutely, it does a lot of stuff there, not just for a double, but a single. So one of the things is, I had had this picture right here of this highway, right? One of the things it does is it has these dynamic guardrails. So it'll go in first and run a baseline. So let's say if I have a 100 meg internet connection, it'll start, it does this optimization thing. So you have to first go in and you have to optimize it properly. So what it starts doing, it starts sending different types of traffic and packets across your internet connection, and it starts detecting at what point does the latency start jumping up and down, because always the more traffic you get, all of a sudden your latency starts going up, it starts going higher, and then it starts really spiking up and down. So that does two things. One, it increases your latency, and the other thing, it increases your jitter, and if you go high enough, you start getting packet loss. So first, it'll detect all of those things and find out where is your usable bandwidth, right? You might have, 300 meg like I do, but that's if I go, me personally, if I go above 110, then it puts everything at jeopardy, right? It's like as if I take this highway right now, I take off these guardrails, I remove the lanes, and I go ahead, guys, you can drive all over the place. Well, all this is going to do is going to take the traffic that I have here and it's going to put it at jeopardy, right? So the same thing there is it puts these dynamic guardrails where it detects that, okay, where is that breaking point that it's going to mess up the entire internet connection if I go beyond that, and it puts these guardrails and doesn't allow it to break. So that's the first thing it does. The second thing it does, it looks within there and it makes adjustments to things like your MSS, your MTU, and everything else dynamically to make sure that you're not, to avoid things like fragmentation and those type of things. And the other thing it does is I mentioned the queuing. So one unique part about us is if you're doing QoS, but you're only doing QoS on outbound, right? So in this case, let's say even if you're doing QoS on this box, you're only doing it outbound. You're not. You could do it inbound as well, but by the time it gets to this box to do QoS, it's too late because you flooded this pipe. There's all kinds of congestion. There's all kinds of other stuff going on here. Where we're different is even with one internet connection, you're doing, we have multiple classes of how to handle this, whatever bandwidth you have allocated here, and it's handling it from both sides, up here and down here. So let's say if you have let's say 50 meg, it's optimized at 50 meg, it'll break up that bandwidth, and if you have tons of traffic coming in here, it'll organize it properly. It's not going to allow your 50 meg to get flooded by traffic coming in this way, because up here it's going to hold it back and queue it properly and allow things like voice to get through first. So you have to have the two-sided piece of it from up here and down here in order to make the quality work. but it definitely works across one. When you add a second line, it adds a whole nother dynamic in there, because now you have the differences between those lines, which ones are better optimized for what type of traffic, and it properly load balances across those. But one line, absolutely, it does miracles for one line.
All right, well, perfect. We have reached an hour and 5 minutes. And there are still a few of you on the line. We'll go ahead and answer one more question. If we don't have time to answer your question now, please contact your sales rep, or you can contact sales@MyDigitalShield. So the last question, Andrew, is how will you add security with OmniBridges? Is it the only device now, or will you need another box?
You do not need another box. The OmniBridge, basically all of our security is the OmniShield piece up here, right? That's where all the security happens. In order for the security to happen up here, we just need to get your traffic from here to here. It's a function of extending your perimeter from here, where this is now your new perimeter. Now to do that, there's a couple of ways to do it. Today, a lot of times we do it with IPsec tunnels. It could be with the BYOG, right? Bring your own gateway, and that's creating a tunnel from here up to here, and then sends it through OmniShield. It's just connecting to a different point, not the Omniwin, like the Omniwin node or Omniwin functionality up in our cloud, right? Just connecting to regular IPsec VPN. The OmniBridge, it's the same thing. So the OmniBridge will, as a piece of hardware, it'll replace your firewall, your router, your everything, right? It's the one piece, and all it does is it takes and bridges your network from here up to here, providing all that Omniwin functionality in between, and all of your security is the OmniShield piece right here. So your perimeter is still up here. You still have the public IP address up here. Everything goes in and out through here. It's the OmniBridge is making that connection. It's bridging your network up to the network up here to your perimeter. Hopefully that answers the question there.
Okay, well, Andrew, thank you. Thank you for taking time out of your day today. If we were not able to answer your question, or you have a question that pops up later, you can contact us at info@sales@mydigitalshield.com. Once again, thank you for attending our webinar today. Andrew, thank you for your time as well.
Thank you, Leonard, and thank you, everyone.
We'll conclude our webinar today. Bye now.